Okay, so like, who hasn't daydreamed about finding like a treasure map to ultimate wealth, right?
Right.
Some ancient secret, maybe a talking sphinx that knows the way to riches beyond imagination.
Ah.
But seriously, what if I told you we could get some ancient financial wisdom from Babylon?
And not just any wisdom, we're talking about a book that's been a bestseller since, get this, 1926.
Whoa, 1926, The Richest Man in Babylon,
Mhm.
right? That's almost 100 years of people turning to this book for financial advice.
Exactly. And it's not your typical dry finance book either. It uses these really engaging parables, little stories set in ancient Babylon to illustrate the principles.
I love that. It's like sneaking a little fun with your financial planning.
Exactly. And one of the most compelling stories is about a guy named Bansir. He's a chariot builder living in this incredibly wealthy city, but guess what? He's broke.
Oof, I feel that.
Yeah.
Being surrounded by people who seem to be rolling in dough while you're, well,
And he actually laments this. He says, "We live in the richest city in all the world. About us is much display of wealth, but of it we ourselves have not."
ugh, right. Like, how am I supposed to get ahead when everyone around me seems to be doing so much better? So relatable, even thousands of years later. But wait, so how does Bansier turn things around?
He has a chance encounter with the richest man in Babylon, Arkad.
Okay, so it is like finding that talking sphinx. Does our cod just give him a treasure map to wealth or something?
Not exactly. He agrees to be Bansir's mentor and lays out his wisdom in the form of 7 cures for a lean purse.
7 cures. I'm intrigued. So is cure number 1 be born into wealth? Because I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed.
Not quite, though it probably felt just as impossible back then. Cure number 1 is start thy purse to fattening.
Okay, I like the sound of that. What's the ancient Babylonian secret?
It's pretty simple, actually. Pay yourself first. Arkad advises setting aside at least a tenth of everything you earn.
Save first, spend later. That's it. Sounds too good to be true.
It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, if that's what you're thinking. It's about building a habit.
Yeah, and it's so easy to put off saving, right? Like, oh, I'll start when I get a raise. But Arkad, he was way ahead of us on that one.
He knew people would make excuses, even back then. He emphasized that building wealth starts with that consistent habit, no matter how small you start.
And I bet he was big on resisting those impulse purchases, right? Like, maybe they didn't have online shopping carts in ancient Babylon, but I bet they had their own versions of temptation.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right on the money, because cure number 2 is all about controlling your spending.
Oh, man. Control by
Yeah.
expenditures. That one's always a struggle.
Right. But Arcot understood that people back then, just like now, had way more desires than they could realistically fulfill.
Okay, so how did they deal with that back then? Did they have budgeting apps or something?
Not exactly apps, but Arcad stressed the importance of differentiating needs from wants.
It's so easy to blur those lines, though, right?
Tell me about it. And it seems like they had their own version of that add to cart impulse back then, too.
I can only imagine. But okay, so we've covered saving and spending. What's next on Arkad's list of financial wisdom?
Well, get ready, because this is where things get really interesting. Cure number 3 is all about making your money work for you. It's called Make Thy Gold Multiply.
Okay, now we're talking investing, right?
You got it. But we're talking ancient Babylon here, so no fancy stock market apps or anything.
Right, right. So how'd they do it back then?
Arkad was way ahead of his time. He understood the power of compound growth. There's this great example in the book about a farmer who lends 10 pieces of silver to a moneylender. Over time, just through interest and that compounding magic, the silver grows significantly.
Whoa, hold on. So you're telling me even back then they knew the secret to growing wealth wasn't about having a ton of money to start with.
Exactly. It's like planting a seed. You nurture it, give it time, and it grows into something much larger.
Okay, I am definitely feeling some hope for my own lean purse right now. But, sometimes I need a little more than inspiration. Sometimes I need a good cautionary tale to really drive the point home.
Well, you're in luck, because the richest man in Babylon has got those too.
Oh, tell me more. What kind of cautionary situations are we talking about here? Give me the ancient Babylonian drama.
Think get-rich-quick schemes gone wrong, bad loans, trusting the wrong people with your hard-earned gold, all those timeless pitfalls of money management.
Ooh, those never go out of style, do they?
Nope. And there's this one story that really stands out. It's about a spear maker named Rodan. He gets a nice little bonus, 50 pieces of gold.
50 pieces of gold. That's going to be like winning the lottery in ancient Babylon.
Right. And naturally, everyone's got advice for how we should spend it. His brother-in-law comes along with this amazing business proposition.
Uh-oh. I've heard that one before. Did Rodin jump right in?
Well, here's the thing about Rodin. He's cautious. Before making any decisions, he goes to Mathon, the gold lender, for advice.
Okay, good move. Seeking out some wisdom from someone who actually knows about money.
Exactly. It's like finding a financial advisor in ancient Babylon, right? So Mathon, he's a pretty fascinating character. He basically schools Rodin on the importance of assessing risk.
Risk assessment, love it. What'd they have back then, like a riskometer made of clay tablets?
Huh. I don't know about that, but Mathon had this really cool visual aid. He kept a box of tokens, with each token representing a loan he had given out.
Wait, a token box?
Mhm.
That's actually a really clever system. Were they like little clay tablets with cuneiform writing?
You know, the book doesn't go into that much detail, but I can see why those details would be fascinating. He used the tokens to illustrate different types of loans and why some were riskier than others.
Okay, so what was Malthon's big takeaway? Don't trust your brother-in-law with your gold.
Huh. That's probably good advice in any era. But the real lesson is universal. Be careful. Be informed. Do your research before investing in anything, even if it's coming from family. Mathon, he really stressed the importance of a solid business plan, experience in the field, having tangible assets. It's like he was anticipating all the ways people could get in over their heads, even back then.
It's amazing how those same traps still exist today. It's like human nature to be lured in by a shiny opportunity, you know?
Absolutely. And that's why Mathon's advice is so powerful, because it cuts through all of that. It's like he's speaking directly to us across the centuries. Speaking of timeless advice, we should probably dive into the 5 laws of gold.
Oh, yes, the 5 laws. So how do those fit in with the 7 cures? Are they like a condensed, supercharged version?
Think of them as the distilled essence of Arkad's wisdom. These laws, they're not just about getting rich, they're about holding on to that wealth and making it grow over the long term.
Ooh, I love the sound of that. All right, lay it on me. What's the first law? Okay, so law number 1, it's all about that pay yourself first mentality, right? Setting aside that 10th before anything else.
Absolutely. But the journey doesn't end there. Law number 2, it's about putting that saved gold to work. It says, gold laboreth diligently and contentedly for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying even as the flocks of the field.
Okay, so they weren't afraid to get a little flowery with their language back then, huh? But I think I get the gist. Invest wisely. Make that money grow.
Exactly. Find those opportunities where your gold can do the heavy lifting for you. And you know, it makes you think, what would Arkad say about today's investment options?
Right. Imagine telling someone in ancient Babylon about index funds and real estate investment trusts. They'd probably think we'd invented some kind of magic. But speaking of magic, there's more to the laws, right?
Oh yeah, there's more. Because it's not enough to just make money, you have to hold on to it too. And that's where law number 3 comes in. It advises, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invests it under the advice of men wise in its handling.
So basically, don't be afraid to ask for help. Seek out those who know more than you.
Precisely. Don't let your ego or pride get in the way of making smart decisions. It's like you wouldn't try to perform surgery on yourself, right? Some things are best left to the experts.
Okay, that's a pretty convincing argument for finding a good financial advisor. I'm sold. What's next?
Law number 4 is all about avoiding those tempting but often risky ventures. It warns, gold slippeth away from the man who invests it in businesses or purposes with which he is not familiar or which are not approved by those skilled in its keep.
Okay, that's some seriously sage advice. Don't put all your eggs in a basket you don't understand.
Exactly. Stick to what you know or find people you trust who can guide you. It's about being cautious and informed.
It's like that saying, if it sounds too good to be true.
It probably is. You got it. Okay, ready for the 5th and final law.
Hit me with it.
All right, here it is. Gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings, or who followeth the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or who trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires in investment.
Ooh, that one feels particularly relevant today, don't you think?
Ah,
With all the get-rich-quick schemes floating around the internet, it's like, easy there, buddy. It takes time to build real wealth.
right. It's about being patient, being disciplined, and not falling for every shiny object that comes your way.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Love that. But, you know, we've been talking so much about these laws, I almost forgot about Bansir.
Yeah.
Did our chariot-building friend ever find his own path to prosperity?
Well, he sets his son, Nomasir, on the right path. And you know what's really interesting about Nomasir's story?
What's that?
He doesn't become an overnight success. In fact, he makes some pretty big mistakes early on.
Really? Even after learning from the richest man in Babylon himself?
Even then. It just goes to show that learning about money and actually putting it into practice are two different things.
That's so true. We all make mistakes. It's part of the journey.
Exactly. But here's the key takeaway from Nomasir's story. He doesn't give up. He learns from his mistakes, dusts himself off, and recommits to those timeless principles Arkad taught him.
He remembered those 7 cures and the 5 laws of gold.
Precisely. And that's what ultimately leads him to success. It's a great reminder that we all have setbacks, but it's our ability to learn, adapt, and keep moving forward that ultimately determines our financial well-being.
So powerful. And, what really strikes me about The Richest Man in Babylon is how timeless it is. These stories, these principles, they still resonate today, thousands of years later. It just goes to show that human nature, our desires, our struggles with money, they're surprisingly universal.
Absolutely. It's incredible to think that a book written in 1926, drawing on even older wisdom, can still offer such practical and relevant advice for us today.
It really makes you wonder, what will people say about our financial habits thousands of years from now? What will be the ancient wisdom that we pass down? That's something to ponder, isn't it? But for now, I think we've had our fill of wisdom for one day.
I agree.
To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Richest Man in Babylon. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights and maybe even a little inspiration to take control of your own financial journey. Until next time, keep seeking that ancient and modern wisdom.